Hi, Jeff.
Hi, guys. Is it hot out there?
Understatement. You know it is.
Hey Jeff,
Yeah.
how about them Dodgers, huh?
Oh, well, hey, I was at the game Tuesday night when it was 11-1. Wasn't they sort of like, I left early because it looked like they just gave up.
Yeah.
It worked out okay, but I think they got to worry about the Giants right now.
Yeah,
Everybody's on there. I don't know, man. That pitching staff is in a pretty tough spot right now. They are in disarray, and I've never seen anything like it as far as all those pitchers on the disabled list. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. All right, have to focus.
All right, I'll call the program meeting to order at 12:00 p.m. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Move on to meeting minutes from the April 10th.
Move approval.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move on to public comments. At this time, comments from the audience may be made on items not listed on the agenda that are of public interest and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district. The committee has a policy of limiting speakers to not more than 3 minutes. The committee cannot take action on items not listed on the agenda. Public input may be offered on an agenda item when it comes up for discussion and/or action. Are there any public comments at this time, Andrea?
Are there any comments from our audience online for items that are not listed on the agenda? Please raise your hand. If not, we'll move on. None.
Is there any public comments from the room? Hearing none, we'll move on to Chief Executive Officer report. Is there one for today?
No reports other than what's on the agenda today.
We'll move on to program updates. Number 1 is progress and final report update. Does anyone have a question regarding the progress and final report? No? Move on to number 2, grant application status report. Does anyone have any questions regarding the grant application status report? No, I don't. Okay. Move on to number 3, the data walk, building resilient youth. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding?
I would like to see if staff has, aside from the staff report, if any other highlights that they would like to share with committee members.
Yeah, so in addition to the report, Megan Kane will give an overview of what transpired at the data walk last week.
Yeah, so we weren't able to include it in the packet because it occurred the same day we published. So you'll get a more detailed one in the next packet, but just verbally, we had about 62 participants. We filled this room. I would say we had representation from about 40 different organizations. It was very well received. Everyone was really engaged. This was a huge team effort by the district. Gracie and I spent about 6 weeks preparing for this event, as well as having many staff members the day before and the day of help kind of make it functional. And I think it went really smooth. We got a lot of feedback, and right now we're working through probably like 25 pages of notes just from the event, and like sticky notes from all over the walls and things to help kind of summarize it, key takeaways, key themes, so we can start formulating an RFP and bring our recommendations back to the board. I don't know if Gracie has anything else to add, but
I think you covered it.
yeah. That's it.
Just some good participation. It sounds like.
Yeah, it was great.
For organizations. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions regarding the data walk? Are there any questions from the community? Okay, we'll move on to grant funding actions. We have number 1, grant number 1488 for Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. Bridging care gaps, expanding sexual and reproductive health services in Coachella Valley for $236,555 for 12 months. I believe the information was in the packet. Does anyone have any questions specifically regarding the application of the grant?
I do.
I don't have any questions. I move for approval.
I'll second. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. It's all good.
Okay, so do we need to have a roll call for this one, Andrea, or all in favor is okay?
All of it.
You need to do roll call
Oh, yeah.
since it's for
Just one
money.
member doing a roll call.
Oh,
I mean, but we certainly
Okay,
can.
sorry.
But we usually don't.
Okay.
Committee, right?
Right. Okay.
I mean, I just think it's a good practice to do a roll call vote for best practices purposes. It just makes it easier.
Okay, Secretary Barraza,
Yes.
Vice President Rodriguez.
Yes.
And President Perez Gill.
Yes. We'll move that one forward to the board for final approval. Move on to number 2, grant number 1499, Clínicas de Salud del Pueblo, BBA Intercare Coachella Valley Teaching Health Center Program to address primary care physician shortage. It's for a total amount of $5,263,551 over a 3-year period. Does anyone have any questions regarding the information provided?
I do. I think need a little bit more clarification on the legal recommendation. So if I'm understanding this correctly, what we want to do is we want to continue processing the application, but continue doing our due diligence on an MOU and PSAA within the Eisenhower part of it. We did receive an email from their consultant this morning saying that these documents aren't available or will not be. One of the questions is, and I know that we have members of Intercare here, they might be able to help us answer unless we already know this answer. Legal recommendation is saying that we hold off until July. But are those documents, well, one of the questions are those documents going to be available in July? Or is this just going to be like a?
No, and that's part of the due diligence process that we're working with here. And, you know, we've done a certain amount of due diligence work so far, but then when the legal component came about to be able to review any MOU and or affiliation agreements with the hospitals, that should be required for us in our due diligence process to complete that. Though my understanding is that those documents, the affiliation agreements, understanding that MOUs are not part of it from the email that was sent, but the affiliation agreements would still need to be negotiated once the program director is recruited by Intercare, and that would be, you know, developed along with, you know, the hiring and recruiting of the other positions that are on the first year budget. And so that could be an option for us. And, you know, based on what legal counsel guides here, but it's an option for us to be able to potentially award the first year budget of $1 million, allowing Intercare to continue with their process because they still need to develop they were approved for their sponsoring institution application with ACGME in May, and allowing them then to develop a program for family medicine residency program and then negotiating the affiliation agreements. So that would allow during that first year for Intercare to continue building out the program and completing these documents for legal counsel to review along the way. And that may be an option that staff would include coming back in July after completing the other due diligence work. But legal can provide his input on what.
So yeah, and I guess a follow-up question for the record, Chris or either Jeff, if you can clarify what the issue is, just so we can have it on the record as well of having Intercare. I know that the email that was sent by the consultant, it's saying that due to CMS rules, and I'm reading from the email, governing GME funding, that it caps that Eisenhower, but it wouldn't be that there's really no like financial interest or that there wouldn't be any like revenue generated to Eisenhower on this grant. Can you see Jeff
Yeah.
has a hand raised?
Yeah, let me take a shot at this, Kimberly, to clarify it. The first year grant, if you go to the actual breakdown and you look at the staffing and the expenses that are being requested during the first year, there's really nothing in the first year that touches on the legal concern that these recruited physicians will be working for Eisenhower. That really doesn't, there's a difference in the second and third year components. And that's what raises the legal concern. And that the legal concern is just to verify that they recruited physicians who will be, depending upon how these documents are spelled out, could potentially be, we want to make sure that they don't violate the covenant not to compete. And by that, I mean, is that in the second half of the second year grant, that kicks in at about the same time that the 27 covenant not to compete, which we're in litigation on right now, and is basically being addressed at the court level. And so we just want to make sure that at that point that the district funds would not be in violation of that covenant. And I think we have an opportunity. I mean, the bottom line from my perspective is the first year looks pretty clean. It looks clean. It isn't pretty. It looks clean. But if you agree for the full funding, then I think there's a potential, depending upon how those documents, which I understand they've got to get a director in there before they enter into these agreements. But I think it's critical that we move prudently through this process. And it's certainly, a worthwhile program, and we want to support it and all those kinds of things. But we just want to verify that we are not doing anything that would put us in jeopardy with respect to that covenant. And like I say, we're working on that. But I think this gives us an opportunity to, for the staff to continue their due diligence and bring this back to you in July and see where we're at. But from a legal perspective, my concern is in the second half of year 2 and then in the third year, and the funding, the expenses that are different in the second and third year as opposed to the first year. You follow me?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Chris, I have another question. So I know that in the follow-up or in your response to Carmela, you mentioned what Jeff also mentioned was like the first year not being an issue. You also, on your email, it says, come back with the application for the remainder in the year. So would this mean that if we were to move this graph forward to fund the first year, then InterCare would have to come back and start a whole new application and go through the whole process again? And if that's the case, let's say that they do so in a year, maybe by next year, our strategic plan has changed. And I'm not necessarily saying that this high priority is going to change, but if that does change, then their, chances of maybe being awarded would be very different. Would that be the case?
I mean, that's an unknown based on what the directors come out of the strategic planning with. I honestly would be very surprised if the component of, providing or expanding access to primary specialty care as well as behavioral health care services, I'd be surprised if that goes away in our next strategic planning process. However, we are still under the current strategic plan until June of 2026. So this could be brought back for that second and third year component and still be awarded within that same strategic plan or the current strategic plan. So it's really more of a deal of the fiduciary responsibility with the resources to consider feeling confident that the first year program is good, and being able then to validate the legal issues that need to be addressed with these affiliation agreements with the hospital, primarily Eisenhower. So I don't see that as a problem. I think it would be beneficial, especially for the directors with fiduciary responsibility, to be able to see that, not putting that money, the 5 million, out ahead of the cart, really.
I was gonna say, okay, so would it be possible, I mean, you provided one option. I'm wondering if this other would be an option, you would move it forward for full board consideration, but tweaking it or putting in some like contingency plans where, I mean, they're not gonna be funded in full out once. We would be giving them the money installments, where we can include some sort of clause saying, we move it forward, if approved by the board, let's move forward, grant the first year, while we wait to hear back. If we were to hear back from like legal counsel, get an answer and say, you can't do that, then we do not release the rest of the funding, and just kind of like hold it. And that would be something that we'd be in agreement with Intercare. I'm not sure if that's an option, and I'm not sure if this is something that they like consider. I would be interested, I think right now, those are kind of like questions and thoughts. I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say, and then I know that we have Intercare here, and I see some attending as well. I'd like to hear from them. One, the importance of like a full allocation or full grant, and then also if they can talk a little bit more about like the actual issue I've had with like Eisenhower funding them, but.
So I'm thinking along the same lines, and just because I know for organizations, but when, like applying for multi-year grants, there's that need for a level of certainty that that's going to be there to effectively implement the program. I'm wondering if it's kind of along Kimberly's point about, could we put language in the contract about, and I don't know how to phrase this because I'm not an attorney, but basically preventing Intercare from entering into an affiliation with Eisenhower. Or to Kimberly's point as well, is if after that, the first year we're seeing that there's legal issues, that then we wouldn't award the following 2 years.
So I mean, I guess according to like what's on like code, and I'm reading again from the email, it says Eisenhower Medical Center will not receive any financial benefits, direct or indirect, from its participation as a clinical site. Again, I mean, we do have fiduciary responsibility, but I know we have an applicant that, I mean, we believe to be truthful. So I mean, I don't think that they would be lying, right? And something that would affect their agreement moving forward. But I understand that we as district, we have the responsibility to make sure that we're safe. And so I'm just trying to look for other options aside from just like a 1 year and having them have to go through like a whole application next year. And again, to Greg's point, the uncertainty of having or not that funding. I mean, it's a great program. I think this is our, aligns with our highest priority, and why are we, kind of like making it hard? I mean, we have a responsibility, but I mean, when we talk about our priorities, like this is, the top priority for us. And if we're able to support this, I think, as local healthcare district, we should be supporting such initiatives, such programs. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add something.
I'd like Jeff's legal opinion on inserting some of that language that would.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably work with that. We could come back in July and see what we can come up with. It's just that beginning in year 2, there's faculty members that we're supporting to the tune of about $325,000, and that's different than year 1. And then when you go to year 3, it's a similar staffing issue. You've got residents. Now, they're residents for Intercare, DAP, but I think I would want to make sure that any funding would with respect to year 2 and 3 would be contingent and then, you know, in ultimate, it's your decision, okay? But it'd be contingent upon legal review of the MOU and the other agreement, so that you know, my legal preference is to when you're going to eat an elephant one bite at a time, okay, would probably the safe harbor would be 1 year. But on the other hand, as long as we made it very clear in the contract award that there was a contingency on a, you know, proper documentation. And I don't question their representation, Kimberly. I understand it's all in good faith, but we're dealing with sort of complicated legal issues here that we need to walk carefully on and through. And so I don't want to put us in a situation of where the district's committed something and it turns out that it's, you know, there's a potential violation of this covenant that's at this point is still being addressed by the court. And so I just want to move carefully through this. It's not a question of you know, trying to not support this funding. It's just really, I think we need to be really careful and clear on the second half, particularly of the second year and the third year funding, which gets, you know, it's where you're talking about almost $3 million in the third year. And I think we don't want to, you know, we've got to have some contingencies there from my perspective, but it ultimately is your decision.
Can we hear from Intercare?
Please come to the podium.
I believe that our members are online, but you cannot see them on camera. So I don't know if they also want to chime in. Good morning. My name is Claudia Galvez, and I'm the Chief Officer of Government and Community Relations for Intercare. And I just wanted to give you and thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you to address some issues that you still have. One of the things that we want to make clear is that we're going to follow all your rules in terms of the MOUs that we have to sign with our partners. In terms of the July deadline, I'm not understanding what is that, what the deadline is, but we're not going to have anybody on board by July, just because of the process that takes to hire people, getting on board and train and that. And so that's going to take a little bit. I do, after hearing the board members' concerns, I think that we are okay after you send this application to the board with no conditions, but at the end, when the full board votes on it, that we can add some kind of language to the contract just to make sure that we meet all the requirements of your MOU. So we're in agreement with that. We have no problem with that. It's been stated in many, many emails that we are following your due diligence of meeting your mission and the law that you have to follow. We're in agreement with that 100%. So I don't know if my colleagues want to say something. I know our CEO is also online. So if you have any questions, you can ask us more, or if my comments are just enough to proceed with your.
And I think just to clarify, just to clarify the July, moving this to July, there's still some due diligence that staff needs to do.
Oh, I see.
So that we don't have enough at this point to forward to the next board meeting. So it's not something like where you have to be ready to go by July. We understand that. There's just some other, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but there's some other stuff we have to do on the grant process.
So it's not going to be a board meeting on June 24th?
There will be, but this item won't have to be referred to the July program committee, just because there's other work staff has to do.
I'm curious on what the work is that needs to be done, aside from like the legal, what others,
Right.
so this grant is not ready for like full board consideration aside from the legal? So there's
Do we
still,
want,
so there's still due diligence needed to be done by staff?
Correct, at staff level, because staff didn't, per our policy and our procedure is that if there's question or concern of things that are still needing to be addressed, like with the legal issue here, staff has done a certain amount of due diligence work, but there's still more that we need to complete the process. And so,
Can you elaborate a little bit more? So, because I mean, I'm fairly new to this committee, so can you elaborate a little bit more on what that?
No, there's still-
aside from-
there's still some internal work we need to do. We need to do the scoring that we normally provide with all the grant document or that we present, with the packet for consideration. So that work still needs to be completed, and it could be completed now between then and the July meeting.
So I guess a quick follow-up question to that, then why was it presented to us or in today's meeting if it wasn't like fully ready?
because we had asked for the legal part to go.
Just because of the legal?
We had asked them to go back and ask about the legal part on
So,
the,
okay. So it
the
was just-
second
it
and
was-
third year.
It was
Yeah,
brought
so
back
the
to us
legal
just because of the
part, put a
legal.
hold on it until
Uh-huh.
been presented today. We were going to present it in May, didn't have the meeting. But that was the presentation, and then looking for directions from the board then to whether they want to complete the process. And we can come back then with options, considering either like the 1 year that was just described. We can provide option then for completing, for the full grant with conditions and that type of thing. So that's what would be presented then as our completed packet for our due diligence work. And then giving options for the district, for the director to consider.
Let's say that we were to agree on maybe just funding the first year. This still would not be ready to be moved forward. You would still have to go back and continue the scoring, just so that I understand. Okay.
Correct.
And Jeff has a question. Jeff?
Yeah, I just had a question. I think even the first year, I know they've gotten the designation, but my question is to Intercare, when do you think you'll have this designated institutional official on board? Because that's a contingency to this program. I mean, you can't even do the program unless you, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you need to get that person on board. So my question is, what's the schedule, the timing on that?
So our consultant wants to speak.
Carmela?
Hi, Carmela, you have the floor.
And Carmela, if you could introduce yourself and who you're with and who the organization you're representing. Because I think the last meeting that you presented.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
can you hear us?
I am Dr. Carmela Meyer. I am with Partners in Medical Education. I've been working with Intercare for the past 2 to 2.5 years in developing this program. And I would just like to clarify a few things. We have already received sponsoring institution accreditation. That occurred in May. The designated institutional official is Conrado Barzaga, MD. And so there's like some information I'd like to provide also about CMS funding. Irrespective of the agreement with about not being able to provide Eisenhower funding is trumped by CMS will not allow Eisenhower to collect any money from the Intercare residents. That they are capped. That means that they cannot receive any additional reimbursement for any residents, whether they're Intercare or University of XYZ. It doesn't matter. They are capped. They can't get any additional funding. So the requirement of saying that we won't provide Eisenhower any additional funding is really driven by the way residents are funded, and that is Eisenhower cannot federally receive any additional dollars. So if the board is concerned about them receiving dollars, which I understand, the reassurance is the federal government will not allow them to receive any dollars off of our residents because of their cap. Now, I am more than happy to provide information about the CMS requirements because